Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. Raising children can be challenging on many levels, but how do you thrive as a parent, especially as a father of a special needs child? The late Jeff Davidson, along with his wife Becky, take us on a journey for fathers on how to navigate the inherent challenges of raising a special needs child with grace, love, and compassion. Becky Davidson is a co-founder and president of Rising Above Ministries. After the unexpected death of her husband, Jeff, she assumed the leadership of their shared ministry and honored his memory by shepherding his last book through publication. Becky and her son, John Alex, live in Cookeville, Tennessee. Here to discuss Common Man, Extraordinary Call, Thriving as the Dad of a Child with Special Needs, is Becky Davidson. Becky, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you today.
Becky, I know Jeff's passing left a huge void in your journey.
Yes.
And I want to honor his memory. Before we dive into this manual, this handbook, this field guide to a dad raising a special needs child, will you take a moment and share with our audience some insights into Jeff and the man and father he became during his initial struggle, and as he navigated through the reality of what this journey was going to entail in embracing John Alex as fully as his son, as completely and wonderfully made in God's image. But when he went down to the basement, when he was in that cave and he was in that alone time, it wasn't easy for him, was it?
No, it wasn't. And, I think anytime that you are planning on starting your family, having children, you have these dreams and visions of what you think your life is going to look like. We thought that we'd be your typical American family. And Jeff was a big sports guy. He always played sports in high school. He loved going to University of Tennessee football games with his dad. And so he dreamed that those would be the kinds of things he would do with our son, John Alex. And when our son was born, we thought everything was fine. We didn't know that anything was out of the ordinary. But as he got older, every month he just wasn't reaching those milestones. And we would every month go, okay, well, next month he'll be able to do that. Well, next month would come and next month would go, and he wouldn't be able to do those things that the books say that he should be able to do. And for parents, for moms, we deal with things completely differently than the dads do. I got into this mode of started researching and finding therapies and things like that. But for Jeff, when he started realizing he was not going to be able to do the same things with his son that he did with his dad, it wrecked him. And, a lot of men are fixers. And when he realized this was something he could not fix, then he would spend lots of time working. He was really good. He was a salesman, a businessman. That was his career when John Alex was born, and he was good at it. And so he threw himself into what he could do and do well. And I remember, and he shares it in the book, I would be upstairs with John Alex getting him ready for bed, and Jeff would go down to the basement, down to his office, and would work. And I would call downstairs and say, hey, we're going to bed, if you'd like to come up and see us. And then he would, reluctantly come back upstairs. But when he was at work and when he was doing what he was comfortable with, he could do those things. But when it came to his son, it was a struggle, because his son was not able to do the things that he thought he should be able to do. And so he struggled early on with just learning, when you think, okay, we're going to play sports, or we're going to ride bikes, or we're going to play basketball together. And when that's not going to happen, how do you readjust that? And how do you refocus that into what things are going to look like? And you have no vision at that point as what things are going to look like. And so for him, he struggled, and he struggled with how do I interact with this child? How do I play with this child? When you have a child who's nonverbal, who cannot walk on their own, who needs 24/7 care, how do you learn to interact with that child? And so for the first several years, it was such a challenge for him learning how to engage with our son. But there's a time, and I actually was looking at it in the book this morning, just a few minutes ago, and where he talks about taking John Alex to the swing. We have a swing that hangs in his room. It's part of his therapy that we do with him. Even today, at 21 years old, we still swing. And Jeff took him to his swing, and he was just kind of haphazardly swinging him. Then he all of a sudden started making funny sounds, and John Alex started cackling and laughing, and Jeff started getting that reaction from him. So Jeff made more sounds and made, spaceship sounds and train sounds and all kinds of things. And that was kind of a turning point for him, was that he realized different ways that he could interact with John Alex. And that just was a light bulb moment for him.
Becky, as you looked at your husband, I know that you grieved,
oh my goodness,
for what he was grieving about.
Yes.
And as I read the description of his navigating through this, it was all the stages of grief.
Absolutely.
There was anger, there was denial, there were all the things that we do in the process of grief. Mm-hmm. Yet because Jeff was an extraordinary man, he was a soldier, he was a businessman, he came to this crossroads through a cathartic moment with his son. Yes. And at that turning point, became someone that said that if I'm going to excel over here, this is what God's called me to excel at over here.
Absolutely.
Now, as a wife, you too had to struggle in watching your husband struggle, and many of your expectations weren't being met either. And we find this dynamic in a marriage where mom kind of is thrown in and does not have a choice.
Right.
You can't go hide in the basement. You can't
That's
go
right.
through your anger and your denial and your grief process. You have this child that has this need, and so you're almost cheated out of. And in a lot of cases, there's an anger and a resentment and division that takes place between the husband and the wife, because now your caregiver, your mother, caregiver, wife, homemaker, and your dreams and desires were exactly the same as Jeff's dreams and desires. You had those together, but now you had to set those on the shelf. They weren't going to happen, and you had to deal with the moment-by-moment realities of diaper changes, not at 1 year old, but at 8 years old, at 10 years old, at 12 years old. And this wasn't what your dream was either. But there's a factor that entered into all of this, and it was the glue that really wound up bringing together the whole family. Mm-hmm. And that was your faith.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Jeff and I both grew up going to church our entire life. If the doors of the church were open, we were there. As children, we always went to church. He went with his family, I went with my family, and that was such an important part of who we were, of our family, and we wanted that to continue in our married life, and it did. And I honestly do not know how we could have navigated this journey as special needs parents without having that faith. It was just a critical component and the foundation that helped us get through the day-to-day trials and journey of raising our incredible son with special needs.
When you decided to carry this project forward, this was to honor what Jeff had invested in this field manual, which is really kind of the way it's laid out and the way he even says it's laid out. When you began to read what he wrote, and this became a part of his legacy, what was it that you began to see about your husband that you hadn't known? What were some of the, wow, I never knew he thought that, I never knew he felt that, I never knew he experienced that. What were some of the things that even after death you had new revelation of who your husband was?
I think for me, being able to go back and reread some of the things that he wrote, It was so healing for me and part of the grief process just to be reminded of his great love for John Alex and for myself, not only for his love for us, but for his love for the special needs community and especially for special needs dads. Because we worked together in ministry, we were together so much that I knew his heart. I knew what he wanted in this book, and to go back and read those things, to read blogs that he wrote about me. His very last blog that he wrote was Mothers for Mother's Day 2017, and to have that gift. That was just a few days before he passed away, and to read his love and his heart and his respect and admiration for special needs moms, especially me. Just what a gift that was to see. He was one of the most gifted writers and speakers I've ever known. And I know I'm a little biased, but he truly was, and just had such a heart for getting to the deep heart of the special needs family. He didn't try to sugarcoat things. He didn't try to make it look like he had it all together. I think I just even gathered so much more respect for him in that he didn't try to sugarcoat his mistakes or to hide the things that he wished that he had done differently. He was so vulnerable that he wanted to share those things. And I think that was one of the things was just going back and reading how honest he was about his emotions. It'd be real easy just to go, oh, well, I had it all together and I was the perfect dad. But he didn't want to do that. He wanted to show his mistakes and show where he had messed up and what he had learned. It was so important to him to be able to do that. And so I think for me, it just gave me such a deeper respect and admiration for him that a lot of people don't realize how sick he was the last few years of his life. And even the last few days of his life, he is in the ICU fighting for his life. And yet he knew he was on the deadline for this book. And he asked for his computer to be brought to him in the ICU so he could work on the book. It was that important to him. And so, with his last breath, he wanted to make sure that this message got to the dads, not because he wanted to show them where he had it all together, but he wanted to show, this is where I messed up. This is what I want to teach you so that you don't have to live all those years like I did in that place of denial and anger and frustration. But where you have to experience all those things. That's part of it. But how you can quickly move through those things and really learn how to become engaged and involved with your family and to not check out, as a lot of dads do.
When you made the decision that you were going to take this to publication, you were going to work with Kriegel Publications, one of our great partners, send us tremendous authors. And one of the things I like about their authors a great deal is the transparency, the real truth of it. And I think that the character of the principles of Kriegel came alongside of you.
Absolutely.
And people don't understand the publishing world. Millions of books are published each year. Everybody's an author. I have two. I'm very blessed that both of them were bestsellers and continue to be in the top 10 in my field, even a couple of years after they've been published. But it's not an easy industry. It's not what you expect it to be. There's not a lot of glamour to it. You don't get rich, unless you're one of the, I think statistically only 15,000 books a year sell more than 1,000 copies.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just so the odds are astronomical against a book being successful. But you had this message, and you wound up meeting with the publishing company, and I think this is a part of the story because they shared the vision with you.
Yes.
That men don't have resources that women do. The women's section of the books of the Christian books, the women's section, I interview 90% of my authors that I interview, and I interview 3 a day, 52 weeks out of the year. That's 750 authors. 90% of them are women. writing about women's issues to women,
Right.
because it seems that the belief is that women read more books than men. They probably do, but when there's a compelling book for a man to read, he's going to grab a hold of it and read it. And what was your experience? Because I think this is part of the overall, I want to paint this 360-degree picture of the experience of the common man, extraordinary call, thriving as a dad, of a child with special needs, about the whole story behind it. So what did you find from the publisher?
Well, this was what was very interesting. Jeff had been working with an agent back in the spring before he died, and he'd written a book proposal for this book, and had been working with this agent, and they got the book deal with Kriegel. And so he had signed the contract with Kriegel just a few weeks before he passed away. Well, he died on a Tuesday, and my son, John Alex, happened to also be very ill at the same time. He was in another hospital in Nashville, as Jeff was in. They were in two separate hospitals. One was at Vanderbilt, one was at Centennial. So I had the two most important people in my world, both in the hospital at the exact same time. And so Jeff passed away on that Tuesday, and John Alex is still in the hospital, but I had to come back home to plan Jeff's memorial service. So my family stayed with our son at the hospital. And when I came home, in the mailbox was the signed contract back from Kriegel, plus Jeff's first advance check. And I remember just the crushing grief anyway of losing Jeff, but then just thinking, well, now this dream has died too, because I knew how important this message was to him. So the week following his death, I reached out to his agent just to make sure she knew what had happened. And they had been working behind the scenes. They knew that Jeff had died, and she had already been in contact with Kriegel. And she just came back and she said, we know how important this message is. Kriegel knows how important that this story, how important it was to Jeff, and how important it is for these dads. And they said, we want to do whatever we can do to make this happen if you're willing. And I was like, absolutely. I mean, I never in a million years dreamed that we would be able to move forward after his passing. And so Kriegel, I cannot say enough good about Kriegel. They just walked alongside me and helped me through every bit of the process, through the whole entire thing. They were absolutely amazing. And so to see it actually, in print, to have it, I'll never forget that box coming of the author books, and for me to see the first copy and to see the beautiful picture of my son and husband on the cover. The picture that just, I can't tell you what that did for me. And to know that Jeff's legacy, what was so important to him, is continuing on. So I can't say enough good about Kriegel. They were absolutely amazing. And no, it was not an easy process. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But Jeff left so many beautiful writings and so many sermons and so many things that we were able to pull from, that, a lot of people don't have that gift. But I had the gift of having his talks that he had given, his sermons, and all these notes. And it was just such a gift. It was like a gold mine, to go in and every day find different things that he had left, different notes and different just little nuggets of truth that he left behind. And so to be able to take those and put them into this finished product was just such a gift to our family, and to be able to carry on his legacy.
As you read this father's guide, being a mom of a special needs child, what did you find as you compared and contrasted your view of the mother's role with his new view of the father's role in this dynamic relationship?
Well, what was very interesting was, I went from, just playing the part of the mom to all of a sudden losing my husband. Now I'm a solo parent doing it all by myself. And so there were many parts that were very convicting to me now as a solo parent, to go, okay, I need to be doing a better job of this, because John Alex doesn't have anybody in this role in his life anymore. And, so that was very interesting to me, as I would read back through the manuscript over and over again, just to go, okay, you need to be stepping it up here, because John Alex now needs you to fill this void. And so it is interesting to go back and just see the different dynamics between how a mom views things, and then how a dad views things, and then now me as the only parent, how I view things. So it's been a good field manual for me, honestly, stepping into this new role of parenting by myself.
Unfortunately, there are many special needs parents that wind up in divorce.
Absolutely.
And there's a crisis
Mm-hmm.
in this. I can't fix it. This is more than I can bear. This wasn't the life that I envisioned.
Yep.
The self enters into it, but there's also this traumatizing failure, feeling that you did something wrong.
Absolutely.
And you have this consuming guilt that says, what did I eat? What did I drink? What activity did I engage in? What doctor's appointment did I miss? What medication did I take? What didn't I take?
Mm-hmm.
What did I mix that I shouldn't have mixed? You as a mother went through
Yes.
that whole
Absolutely.
the whole list of things,
Mm-hmm.
and Jeff as a father who is driven, A-type personality, a man of accomplishment, is hiding out under the protective covering in the basement, going through this whole process of what did I do wrong, and what did I do to cause this, and what if I am to blame?
Mm-hmm.
And every time I look at my child, I'm going to have to look at my child with a lens of guilt. This destroys many families.
Absolutely.
And I think this is part of why you founded Rising Above Ministries, and you decided to carry on with Rising Above Ministries, is because you felt that this was a crisis and needed to be addressed.
Absolutely. We started Rising Above Ministries back in 2005 out of the life of our son, John Alex. And we were at a place where we had come. There's a part in the book that it says, acceptance, it is well with my soul. And that's one of my most favorite parts, is because when Jeff and I both got to this place of going, you know what, this is not the life we would have chosen. This is not how we would have, if we could have designed our life, okay, my life would look absolutely nothing like what it does. But when we got to the place of going, you know what, this is God's absolute best for us. This beautiful boy, created just the way that he is God's very best gift to us. And when we could get to that place of going, thank you, God, thank you for this beautiful boy. He may not be able to walk, he may not be able to talk, but he lights up a room with his smile. He brings joy to everyone who's around him. And when we were able to flip our viewpoint and flip the way that we saw things, and to see this as the most incredible gift, it changed everything for us. And we wanted to help other families to be able to get to that place as well. We wanted other families who were struggling with a diagnosis, struggling with what their life looked like, to be able to get to that place of going, oh, this is good. This is good. And so that's why we started Rising Above. And it's just continued to grow over the years since we started all those years ago.
We're talking with Becky Davidson, who finished the work of her husband, her late husband, Jeff, in the publishing of the book, Common Man, Extraordinary Call, Thriving as the Dad of a Child with Special Needs. Fathers, you play an important role, and you have grief, you have anger, you have denial, you have guilt, but you play an important role. And we say there's no manual. Well, now you have no excuse, because you do have the field manual. This is the father's guide to raising a child with special needs. It addresses your guilt, it addresses your shame, it addresses your feelings in the public when others look at your child distastefully, or try to corrupt your witness as faithful believers, and how you want to respond to them, but how you do it in grace, with love, with compassion and mercy. What kind of activities you can engage in with your child that are going to improve the quality of your child's life. And I picture Jesus speaking right to these children, these special needs children. When he says to me, come to me like children, I almost think he's saying, come to me like special needs children, because they have an incorruptible, unabashed love of God and just a joy which cannot be taken. And this is an example for all of us. And God chose to put John Alex on this earth, right, for a purpose and for a reason. And if you're looking at your special needs child, or you just got the news your child has special needs, and you're wondering, you as a father, where did you fail? What is it your role is going to be? And maybe you have other children that don't have special needs, and how are you going to balance this out? I have a next door neighbor who is a stay-at-home father of a special needs child, so his wife can be the head of a department at a seminary and continue in her career so that he can take care of their needs of their child whose life, she's already been given a life sentence which is much shorter. And so he chose to give up his career because he wanted to spend every moment he could getting her into the programs while she was still capable and still able, knowing that her condition has a terminal diagnosis to it. And he is that kind of dad that Jeff Davidson became, and Jeff Davidson navigated through, and you can navigate through it as well. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the techniques, some of the tools that Jeff developed and shares in this field manual as we talk with his widow and mom, single mom of John Alex, and how she's navigating without her partner in this extraordinary call for common man, extraordinary call, thriving as a dad of a child with special needs. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganation.com. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life.
Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Becky Davidson, who along with her late husband Jeff wrote together Common Man, Extraordinary Call, Thriving as the Dad of a Child with Special Needs. Becky, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Becky, your life is, you've had to go on, you have no choice but to go on in this. Jeff's been gone now almost 2 years since his passing, and if you go out to Walmart, well, John Alex goes out with you. And I'm sure that you encounter many people from many different backgrounds, including Christians, who have less than loving, graceful, compassionate responses to John Alex in the public square. What have been some of those experiences, and are you still, is it still happening to you? Is this something that goes along with the whole package?
You know, it's interesting because when we were new parents, those things used to bother us a whole lot more than what they do now. That our son's 21 now, and when I go out with him now as he's an adult, I often say I get a whole lot more grace than a lot of special needs parents do, because when you look at my son, you can tell he obviously has special needs. But a lot of my friends who have children with autism or have behavior things, that kind of hidden disabilities per se, they don't get as much grace as what John Alex and I get a lot. We get a lot of stares. A lot of times it's from children who just don't know any better. And now that I'm further down the path, that used to, honestly, even though it was a child, it would really bother me early on. Now it doesn't bother me as much. But I'll never forget, I was in the grocery store one day with John Alex, and we were in the frozen food section, and when we would go to the store, I would push his wheelchair and pull the cart. And I remember this lady coming up to me, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, that looks so hard. How in the world do you do that?" And my first thought was, yeah, it is hard here. That's what I wanted to say. But then I thought, John Alex can hear what she's saying, and he can hear how I'm going to respond. So I just responded. I said, "You know what? He is the best shopper. He is just great. I love getting out with him, and he's just so fun to be out with." And she just looked at me kind of like I was crazy because I didn't respond the way she was expecting me to. But I didn't want John Alex to hear me complaining about how hard it was to shop with him. I wanted for him to hear that affirming voice of that I think he's fabulous and wonderful, and I love being out with him. And so a lot of special needs families, they get so many hurtful comments, so many hurtful things said to them, especially from family members. A lot of times it comes from family members, and unfortunately, a lot of times it happens at church. I think for us, some of the most hurtful things that happened to us as a special needs family actually happened at church. And so that's part of why we do what we do at Rising Above, is trying to help churches know how to best minister to families like ours.
You know, there ought to be a course on sensitivity for everyone, a course at college, high school level, seminary level, church level, because unfortunately a lot of times, and I know you take John Alex to church.
Absolutely.
And I don't know whether or not he's not verbal from speaking, but he's audible.
Right.
And he may have in what some might call an inappropriate time, an audible expression.
Yes.
And I know that when I led a congregation, people would say, "Well, do you have a place?" And I'd say, "Yeah, the place is in the pew." And do you have a place for the babies? Yeah, it's in the pew. Do you have a place for the little kids? Yes, it's in the pew. Well, what if my baby starts crying? Well, there's 700 people here, and if they don't know the baby's cry, well, then they're going to be their first introduction. As the pastor, minister, rabbi, listen, I've had people yell at me. I've had people throw things at me. I've had death threats. Okay,
Oh my goodness.
A crying baby
It's nothing.
is nothing. Let the baby cry. Don't be embarrassed, and don't feel like you need a crying room and you need to go out. This is life. This is our witness. Is how do we soothe? How do we comfort? How do we come and support you? What do you need? Is your baby cold? Do you need a blanket? Okay, then let one of our ushers get you a blanket. Let us serve your needs. That's what the community is for. And unfortunately, there are those that will give you the huff and the puff and the glance and the shaking of the head, and they have no idea how that corrupts the witness of a Christian.
Right.
Because what about the non-believer that's visiting? And they say, wow, look at how these Christians respond to a special needs child, has absolutely no control over this whatsoever. They should either pay no attention to it whatsoever, or if it's really timed really well, which in my career, it's been timed really well. Either it was during a punchline, right, or it was a time when I would be talking about a bleeding lamb and a child would cry out and say, you see how God uses the children to reinforce the message?
Yeah.
Or a phone would ring and I would say from the pulpit, we believe you should be called here, okay, just not by telephone. You know, and so it's up to the pastor to work this in and break this down. And it's a community that should be coming together. So I hope that the community you're in embraces John Alex fully.
Absolutely. You know, the church family where we are right now, my husband was actually on staff there. He left the corporate world and went on staff at our church several years ago. And let me tell you, our church family has totally embraced our family, has walked with us through all of our journeys, with having John Alex and then with losing Jeff. And so I'm very, very blessed to be in a church family who totally embraces our family just the way that we are. So for us, it's been good. Now, we've heard horror stories. Part of what we do is church training and helping churches know how to minister to our families. And part of that, we hear stories from other families and things that have the hard things that have happened with them. And, one mom told about she'd gone to visit a church and she had a son with profound special needs. And they took him, he was in church, he started making some noises, and an usher came up and said, well, we have a room for you that you can go to. Well, they took her to this room. She said it was like just a closet, and it was like a storage room that had a speaker. And she said, I couldn't even see what was going on. There was a speaker, but I couldn't see anything. And she said, I felt like such an outsider, like such an outcast. And of course, she didn't go back. So that's part of our heart, is to be able to teach families, to teach churches how to love and serve our families well.
As you read this field manual, what were some of the practical lessons that you felt fathers needed to hear, and that you needed to be a voice for Jeff to express in his voice, in his words, the message to fathers of some practical tips for dads, so that the natural process is they're going to go through the anger, the grief, the denial, all those, the blame, all that stuff.
Right.
But even while they're going through it, he had tips. Even while he was going through it, he was able to do some self-assessment.
Yes.
What message did he have for dads?
Well, there are so many, and the book is just chock full of these just nuggets of truth to help you get through this journey. And I think, one of the things that he talked about was learning to embrace your child the way that God created them to be, to not try to change who they are. But when you can come to that place of embracing who they are, loving them the way they are, then it shifts your whole perspective. It's that place of acceptance. One of the things for us that was a game changer was learning to see what we called the flip side. And for example, as part of the grief process, like we grieved when our son turned 16, and all of our friends who had kids the same age, their kids were getting driver's license, and they'd all post pictures on Facebook, of their kids with their cars and going, getting their driver's license. Well, that was a hard thing for us, because we're like, that is not something that our son will ever be able to do. And so when we were able to see the flip side of that and to go, well, John Alex will never drive, but he also will never get in a car wreck because he's been driving. He will also never, we always will know where he is because he will not be out driving. And so we would take those hard situations, those things that could be such a challenge, and we learn to flip it and to see the good and the positive that could come out of that.
As you look at his message to dads, and dads they kind of take their cues in this case from the mom, waiting for instruction. Get him this, do that, because you're the closest one to him. And it's hard, and it was probably hard for you to not become the general,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and kind of bark the orders of, this is what he needs, this is what you have to do, this is how you do it.
Yes.
Because you had done it and Jeff hadn't done it. So how do you strike that balance? How would you encourage husbands to allow themselves to be the private, the buck private, the basic training private in the early stages of this, and to give the latitude and the grace to the mom who, she's got this maternal instinct, she's got this natural drive, she's more bonded, more connected. Naturally, God does that. I mean, he does that because they're nursing. He does that if they're nursing. He does that if, there's just this bond between, and I know that when we adopted my daughter, I want to be the dad that did the 3 o'clock in the morning. I was 38 years old. So I was already older, much more mature, had a career. I was willing to do whatever, but like at 2, when she would fall down, she'd run to her mother. All right, and it would hurt my feelings. I was right there. She'd run past me to go to mom, and I would get my feelings hurt and say, but I was such an active and involved dad. We were so bonded. But these are things we need to realize. This is natural. This is the natural order of things, and finding our place and finding our role and being a good father. I'm about to become a grandfather, and my daughter's already saying to me, I want you to do with Mila, it's gonna be a girl, the things you did with me when I was little. I remember. And so I'm getting kind of the reward now in the remembrance that there were some things I did right.
Yes.
I went through about a 12-year period of knowing everything I did wrong, but that we've now worked through all that. And one of the things dads have to learn how to do is apologize. That pride and our attachment to our way is not always the best way. But what advice would you have for fathers who are dealing with the general mom,
right,
who they really have to surrender a little bit of their control, a little bit of their my way, because they're not as engaged as the mom is?
Well, we had lots of, I'm laughing because it's taking me back to lots of the conversations that Jeff and I had when John Alex especially was smaller. And, moms, we kind of think our way is the only way and that our way is the right way. And it's very tempting, especially for special needs moms, to get into this state of, to become very controlling and to want things done exactly a certain way. And I totally admit I was like that. I was the kind of mom, it was like, okay, we got to have the meds at this time. His food must be done this way. He must go to bed this way, and all these things. And I'm laughing because it takes me back to those early conversations of Jeff going, okay, don't just like bark at me telling me how to do this, but ask me, you can teach me gently how to do this and how to walk through. So we kind of got to the point of I would show him, okay, this is how I do it. And, I would prefer it be done this way, but he sometimes would do it that way and sometimes he wouldn't. And when I got to the place of going, you know what, it's not going to hurt my child. He's going to be okay. Everything's good. Then I was able to release some of that and let him be dad and do things the way he wanted to do. I know a lot of parents, a lot of moms especially, it is a struggle for us because we so want to be in control. Because I had one mom tell me she has 2 boys with profound special needs. And I remember her telling me, she said, I feel like if I'm not in control of everything, then everything's going to fall apart. And I thought, what pressure that puts on you, that you feel like if your thumb is just not right on top of everything, that the whole world's going to fall apart. And I think especially for those families who have medically fragile children, that's especially the case, because if you don't give a medication the right way or at the right time, then you can be at risk for something life-threatening. And so our special needs families, especially with medically fragile kids, live at such a heightened state of never knowing when the next shoe is going to fall off, per se, what's going to happen next. And so for the moms to be able to just gently teach the dads or show the dads, and for the dads to, Jeff and I just kind of got our rhythm down as to what he was really good at and the things that I was really good at. And so we just found those roles and slipped into those roles and let things fall naturally as they needed to be. And a lot of those conflicts kind of drifted away. But it was interesting early on, those little fights that we would have, because I thought my way was the absolute best way, and I'm sure that it was at the time. But that's a joke. But he, when I started trusting him, and I think part of that too is, as Jeff changed and shifted in the way that he saw John Alex, and when I saw him praying for our family, when I saw him leading our family, I then trusted him. When he started taking that role as the leader of our family, then it helped me to be able to trust him to make decisions. And so we got to a point, I know there's a lot of families where, if there's a medical decision to be made, a lot of times the mom just makes it. We didn't do that. If it came down to, even just a cold medicine, I would go to Jeff and go, Jeff, what do you think about this? He's a little congested tonight. Do you think we should give him some Benadryl or whatever? And if Jeff said, yeah, I think that might be a good idea. Okay, great, we did it. But if he said, I really don't think I think we should wait a little bit, I totally went with that. And because I trusted him. He was a man of prayer. He was in the Word. He was with God. And so I, as the wife, then was able to follow his leading because he was showing me that he was doing those things and that he was hearing from God. And so when those decisions came up, I was able to trust him that he was making the right call.
So really the part of the message that Jeff wanted to leave behind is that the earlier you engage, the earlier you partner, the earlier you realize you're on the same team, the earlier you become involved and engaged in being the spiritual head of the household, putting the family's interests first, being an open vessel to learning, that also creates an environment for the wife to turn the temperature down, and
Yes.
and that they're part of that, their hands on that dial as well, as to keep it on boil until they're willing to step in and come and help ratchet that down a little bit by becoming more involved.
Right.
So this withdrawal syndrome that men often take in the case of special needs children is exactly the opposite response that is what Jeff is promoting in the book, and what you're carrying on is the opposite response. The earlier you can engage, the earlier you can involve yourself, the earlier you can educate yourself and inform yourself, the earlier you can participate and be there, the sooner you will find that a rhythm and a bonding takes place, because that night in the swing
Yes.
was a bonding time with Jeff and with John Alex. How old was John Alex at that time?
He was about 4 or 5 at that point.
Okay.
And, it's sweet because, like, I'm looking, there's a picture up here on the other side of my office of Jeff and John Alex, and they're playing on the floor, and John Alex is much younger than that. And so Jeff always loved his boy. There was never a moment where he did not love his boy, but it was that moment on the swing that was like where he learned that he could interact with him, that he didn't have to be outside playing football or playing basketball, but he could be content bringing delight to his son on the swing, making those funny noises with him. And that was just that moment for him of going, okay, if I get delight in bringing delight to my son, and it doesn't have to look the way that I thought that it should look. It can look completely different. And so for him, that was just this moment of clarity and going, okay, our life's going to look different. It's not what we thought, but it's going to be okay. And, and I think Jeff talks in the book about landmines, things that special needs dads encounter that can trip you up and can cause you to stumble and fall. And one of those is that comparison trap when you're comparing yourself to other families. And I think with all of the social media can be great, and social media can be so detrimental to our special needs families because it's so easy to look and try to compare your life to what other people's lives look, to their highlight reel, that they put out there. And when we do that, when we compare our life to someone in the typical world, there's no comparison. Our life is just completely different. And I think when we can learn to step back and just go, you know what, our family is fearfully and wonderfully made. We are created for a plan and a purpose, and we are destined to glorify God just the way that God created us to be. Then that joy comes in, and that peace comes in, and that contentment comes in.
Amen. Amen. We've been talking with Becky Davidson, who, along with her late husband, Jeff, authored the book Common Man, Extraordinary Call, Thriving as the Dad of a Child with Special Needs. Fathers, you are not mothers. You process differently. Your expectations are different. And when your expectations aren't met, you turn within and often withdraw. But in the life of a special needs child, you are really the difference maker. The maternal instincts of a mom kick in from the moment of birth, and she seems to know intuitively what the child needs, but you're not that connected. You don't understand. And yet, the more you delay it, the harder it is for you to get involved and engaged. And your wife, being the general, may just be the moment that says to you, you know what, let me come alongside of her and learn with her and engage as early on. Her dreams have been dashed too. Her visions have been dashed too. And maybe if we esteem the other more than ourselves and we look at the circumstance and saying, not God, how do I get out of this, but God, what do I get out of this? What do you want me to learn from this? What kind of parent do you want me to be? What kind of father can I be to my special needs child? The sooner you grab a hold of the fact that you are a difference maker in their life and that you can play just the same important role, it just looks different. It sounds different. It's not like your next door neighbors. It's not like the family across the street. But you play an important part in this child's life. And withdrawing or running away from it or blaming yourself for it or hiding in that basement is not going to bring you closer to a beautiful, rich, and loving relationship, not only with your special needs child, but with the mom who is bonded and so concerned for the welfare of that special needs child. The love, compassion, and grace that God has given you is what God is looking for you to give to your special needs child. And fathers, you play an important role, and this resource is a field manual for you, written in the last breaths of a man's life to make sure that this word got out there, this message got out there to dads, that you play an important role. And here's some of the pitfalls, and here's some of the things you can do to make a difference in your special needs child life. Becky Davidson, what an honor and a privilege it is to keep Jeff's memory alive and the legacy going. We pray blessings upon your ministry and upon John Alex, and we thank you so much for sharing this story here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much.
God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.